The council chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched so far into the darkness that no single being could see where it ended. Floating platforms held representatives from 947 different species, each one watching the small group of humans standing at the central podium. Ambassador David Cross felt the weight of 1,000,000 eyes upon him. Though many of those eyes were nothing like human eyes at all, the chamber existed at the heart of Station Prime, a constructed world larger than most moons, built over 60,000 years ago by species that had mastered the stars when Earth was still covered in ice. Light moved strangely here, bending around gravity wells that the station's architects had placed for dramatic effect. The ceiling, if it could be called a ceiling, showed the real-time positions of every star system in the Concordat's territory. There were so many lights that they blended together like glowing dust. David had prepared for this moment his entire life. 30 years of diplomatic service, 15 years specializing in Zeta relations, 5 years learning the languages, customs, and political structures of over 200 species. And none of it had prepared him for how small he would feel standing here. The supreme arbiter floated at the highest point of the chamber, a being called Vostelen, who belonged to a species so old that they had forgotten their original form. Now Vostelen existed as a collection of geometric shapes that rearranged themselves constantly, communicating through patterns of light and sound that translation devices struggled to interpret. The Galactic Assembly recognizes the delegation from Earth, Vostelen announced. The voice came from everywhere at once, vibrating through the floor and the air and David's bones. You may present your petition. David stepped forward. Behind him stood his team, Dr. Amara Diallo, their chief scientist, and Commander James Fletcher, their military advisor. 3 humans facing the collected might of galactic civilization. Supreme Arbiter, honored representatives, David began, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. Humanity comes before this assembly to request elevation to full partner status within the Concordat. We have been provisional members for 73 years. In that time, we have demonstrated our commitment to galactic peace, our contributions to shared scientific progress, and our respect for the laws and customs of the assembly. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took David a moment to recognize it as laughter, though it came in hundreds of different forms. Clicking mandibles, vibrating membranes, flashing colors, rumbling bass tones that he felt more than heard. The human speaks of contributions, said a voice from the Velthary section. The speaker was Ambassador Krellin, a massive insectoid being whose compound eyes reflected David's image 1,000 times over. What contributions? Your species has been part of the Concordat for less than a single rotation of our homeworld around its star. You are infants, children playing at being adults. Our contributions are documented, David replied calmly. Human medical research has led to treatments for diseases affecting over 40 species. Human engineering techniques have improved faster-than-light efficiency by 12% across the entire trade network. Human agricultural methods have increased food production on 17 colony worlds. Minor improvements, Krellin dismissed. Any species could have achieved the same. But they didn't, David said. We did. The laughter stopped. The chamber grew very quiet. David had not raised his voice. He had not made any threatening gesture. But something in his tone had changed. Dr. Diallo noticed it. Commander Fletcher noticed it. And based on the sudden stillness in the chamber, so did every alien representative present. Humanity is not asking for charity, David continued. We are not asking to be treated as special or superior. We are asking for recognition of what we have already proven. We are useful. We are capable. And we are not going away. Vostelen's geometric shapes rearranged into a pattern that the translation device identified as interest. The human ambassador speaks with unexpected confidence. Perhaps he does not understand his position. I understand it perfectly, David said. We are a young species, recently arrived on the galactic stage. Our technology is less advanced than most. Our population is small. Our military is modest. By every objective measure, we should be grateful for whatever scraps the Assembly chooses to throw us. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. But objective measures don't tell the whole story, do they? The Concordat has existed for 60,000 years. In that time, over 2,000 species have achieved faster-than-light travel and joined your civilization. And in all that time, not one of them has developed what we call full technology. The silence that followed was different, deeper. David could feel the attention of every being in the chamber focusing on him with new intensity. You've tried to replicate it, David continued. Your scientists have studied the ships we've shared. They've analyzed the readings from our fold drives. They've run simulations and built prototypes and consulted the greatest minds in the galaxy. And they've failed. Every single time. The technology is unstable, Krellin said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Dangerous. Your species risks destruction every time you use it. And yet we don't get destroyed, David replied. We've made over 50,000 successful fold jumps without a single catastrophic failure. Our ships appear exactly where we want them, when we want them, without the warnings or signatures that conventional FTL produces. He let that sink in. Fold technology changes everything. It makes your defensive networks obsolete. It makes your trade routes inefficient. It makes your military doctrines meaningless. A single fold-capable ship could appear in the heart of any system in the galaxy, conduct any operation it chose, and disappear before anyone knew it was there. Is this a threat? Vos Tellen asked. The geometric patterns had shifted to something the translation device couldn't identify. No, David said. It's an explanation. Humanity has had fold technology for 23 years. In that time, we could have used it for conquest. We could have stolen resources, assassinated leaders, destabilized governments. We could have made ourselves the most feared species in the galaxy. Instead, we joined the Concordat. We shared our medical research. We improved your trade networks. We helped your colonies grow. We did everything in our power to show that we wanted to be partners, not conquerors. He looked up, Vos Tellen directly. And in return, you've kept us as provisional members for 73 years. You've restricted our access to shared technology. You've limited our settlement rights. You've treated us like dangerous animals that need to be watched and controlled. We are patient, David said. But we are not infinitely patient. Humanity is offering the galaxy a choice. Accept us as equals, and we will continue to be the partners we have always tried to be. Or continue to treat us as threats to be managed. And if we choose the second option? Vos Tellen asked. David smiled. It was not a warm smile. Then we will leave. We will take our fold technology, our medical research, our engineering improvements, and everything else we have shared. We will seal our borders and pursue our own path among the stars. And you will never have to worry about the dangerous humans again. You will also never benefit from us again. No more treatments for diseases your scientists can't cure. No more efficiency improvements for systems your engineers can't optimize. No more solutions to problems your civilizations have struggled with for millennia. The choice is yours. But I suggest you consider it carefully. Because once we walk away, we won't be coming back. The chamber erupted. Representatives were shouting, clicking, flashing, vibrating. Platforms were moving as species tried to confer with their allies. The carefully maintained order of the assembly was dissolving into chaos. And in the center of it all, Ambassador David Cross stood calmly, waiting for an answer. He didn't have to wait long. 3 hours later, the Assembly delivered its verdict. Humanity's petition was denied. Furthermore, new restrictions were being imposed. Full technology research was to be surrendered to the Assembly's Science Directorate. Human military vessels were to be fitted with tracking devices. Human colonies were to accept Assembly observers. David listened to every demand. Then he nodded once. "Very well," he said. "As of this moment, Earth formally withdraws from the Galactic Concordat." He turned and walked toward the exit. Dr. Diallo and Commander Fletcher followed. "You cannot simply leave." Vos Tellen's voice thundered through the chamber. "No species has ever left the Concordat." David paused at the threshold. He looked back at the assembled representatives, at the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy. "There's a first time for everything," he said. The doors closed behind him, and the galaxy held its breath. First month after humanity's withdrawal was chaos. Trade Minister Bellix of the Solthary Consortium stared at the reports flooding his office and felt something he had not experienced in 400 years of service. Panic. Pure, uncontrolled panic. The numbers were impossible. They had to be wrong. His analysts had made errors somewhere, miscalculated something, failed to account for some variable that would explain why the entire galactic economy was collapsing. But the numbers were not wrong. Bellix had checked them himself 3 times, using 3 different calculation methods. The results were always the same. Humanity had been gone for 32 days. In that time, the Concordat's gross economic output had fallen by 18%. Trade route efficiency had dropped by 31%. Medical supply chains had failed across 47 systems. Agricultural shipments had stopped entirely in 12 sectors, and it was getting worse every day. How is this possible? Supreme Arbiter Vos Tellen asked when Bellix presented his findings to the Emergency Council session. The geometric being's patterns were shifting rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. The humans represented less than 2% of the Concordat's total population. Their economy was insignificant compared to the major species. Their economy was insignificant, Bellix agreed, his serpentine body coiling anxiously. Their contributions were not. "We have been analyzing human involvement in Concordat systems for the past month. The results are troubling." He activated the display in the center of the chamber. Charts and graphs appeared, showing interconnections between human activities and galactic systems. Human medical research formed the foundation of treatments used by over 200 species. When humanity withdrew, they took their research data with them. "We have the treatments, but we cannot manufacture more because we don't understand how they work." "Surely our own scientists can reverse engineer the formulations," said Ambassador Krellin. The Velthari representative had been notably quiet since humanity's departure. His previous confidence seemed to have evaporated. "They have tried," Bellix said. "The human treatments use biological compounds that our synthesizers cannot replicate. They require manufacturing processes that our equipment cannot perform. And they depend on scientific principles that our researchers do not understand." He changed the display. Human engineering improvements were integrated into over 60% of our faster-than-light navigation systems. Those improvements increased efficiency, reduced fuel consumption, and shortened travel times. Without human technical support, those systems are beginning to fail. Ships are arriving late. Some are not arriving at all. Another change. Human agricultural techniques were implemented on over 400 colony worlds. Those techniques increased crop yields by an average of 40%. The colonies became dependent on those yields to feed their populations. Now, without human guidance, the techniques are failing. Crops are dying. People are beginning to starve. The chamber was silent. The humans were not a minor species that we happened to include in our civilization, Alex said quietly. They were the thread holding that civilization together. And we cut them loose. The implications took time to fully sink in. Species that had never given humanity a second thought began to realize how deeply human involvement had penetrated their daily lives. The Korthini, ancient beings of living crystal, discovered that the radiation emitters sustaining their younger generations were human technology. Without maintenance from human engineers, those emitters would fail within 5 years. The Korthini had no idea how to build replacements. The Ephemerai, gaseous beings who communicated through color changes, found that their translation networks depended on human-developed algorithms. Those algorithms were proprietary. Without access to human databases, the Ephemerai would slowly lose the ability to communicate with other species. The Luminari, beings of pure energy, realized that their very existence depended on dimensional fold points created by human technology. Without new fold points being generated, the Luminari would begin to fade. Within a few generations, they would cease to exist entirely. Species after species came forward with similar revelations. The humans had touched everything. They had improved everything. And they had done it so quietly, so efficiently, that no one had noticed until they were gone. Boss Tullen called emergency session after emergency session. Plans were proposed and rejected. Solutions were attempted and failed. The greatest minds of 947 species worked around the clock to find alternatives to human technology. They found nothing. We must contact the humans. Counselor Marix of the Venari said during the fourth emergency session. The Venari were amphibious beings, known for their patience and wisdom. Marix had lived for over 1,000 years and had seen civilizations rise and fall. We must negotiate their return. They will not respond, Moss Talon said. We have sent 17 diplomatic missions to human space. All 17 were turned away at the border. Turned away how? Their ships simply appeared elsewhere. One moment they were approaching human territory. The next moment they were on the opposite side of the galaxy. No warning. No communication. No violence. Just gone. The fold technology. Of course. Can we force our way through? Krellin asked. Send a fleet large enough that they cannot simply relocate all of them? We considered that option, Commander Veth of the Concordat Defense Force replied, the massive armor being shifted uncomfortably. Our analysts ran simulations. The results were not encouraging. Show us. Veth activated the tactical display. A representation of human space appeared, surrounded by Concordat territory. Human space encompasses 47 star systems. Their military consists of approximately 3,000 vessels, most of them small and lightly armed by our standards. Against them, the Concordat could deploy over 2 million warships. Then we would overwhelm them easily, Krellin said. Under normal circumstances, yes. But human vessels can fold. They can appear anywhere, at any time, without warning. Our simulations suggest that a human fleet of 3,000 ships could destroy a Concordat fleet of 2 million through fold attacks alone. How? By folding our ships into stars, into black holes, into the hearts of planets, into each other. Veth paused. The humans have never used fold technology as a weapon. They claim it requires precise calculations and cannot be used offensively. Our analysts believe they are lying. The chamber fell silent again. If they could destroy us that easily, why haven't they? Marix asked. Because they didn't want to, Veth said simply. They wanted to be our partners. They wanted to work with us, not against us. They gave us 73 years of peaceful cooperation, and we repaid them with demands and restrictions. We were protecting ourselves, Krellin protested weakly. They were dangerous. They are dangerous, Veth agreed. But they were also generous, kind, patient. They helped species that had done nothing to deserve their help. They solved problems that had plagued the Concordat for millennia. They asked for nothing in return except respect. The defense commander looked around the chamber. We refused to give them even that. Vos Talon's patterns shifted slowly, cycling through colors that the translation system identified as regret. What do we do now? The Supreme Arbiter asked. No one had an answer. 3 months after humanity's withdrawal, the temporal markets collapsed entirely. The prediction systems that had guided galactic commerce for 9,000 years simply stopped working. Human involvement had been so fundamental to the economy that removing it made the future itself unpredictable. 4 months after the withdrawal, the first species began to fail. The Bellori, small mammalian beings who had relied on human medical treatments for a genetic disorder, reported that their population was declining rapidly. Without the treatments, their children were not surviving. 5 months after the withdrawal, food riots broke out on 17 colony worlds. The human agricultural techniques had sustained populations that the planets could not feed naturally. Those populations were now starving, and still the humans said nothing. Their borders remained sealed. Their communications remained silent. Their intentions remained unknown. The galaxy had wanted humanity gone. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was dying without them. In his private chambers, Vos Talon reviewed the records of humanity's petition one more time. He watched Ambassador David Cross stand before the Assembly and offer partnership. He watched the humans explain their contributions, their hopes, their desire to be accepted as equals, and he watched himself reject that offer. Watched himself demand that humanity surrender its technology, accept restrictions, submit to monitoring. Watched himself treat these remarkable beings as threats to be controlled rather than partners to be embraced. The Supreme Arbiter had guided the Concordat for 3,000 years. He had navigated crises, resolved conflicts, maintained peace across nearly 1,000 species, and he had made the worst mistake of his ancient life. The question was whether the galaxy would survive long enough for him to fix it. 8 months after the withdrawal, the Assembly received an unexpected message. It came through civilian channels, not diplomatic ones. A simple text transmission from a human scientist named Dr. Thomas Red. He had worked in the Concordat for 30 years before returning to Earth with the rest of his species. His message was brief. I will address the Assembly in person, if you will receive me. Not as a representative of Earth, but as an individual who wishes to explain. Vos Talon accepted immediately. Dr. Reed arrived alone, without guards or assistants. He was an older man, his hair white and his face lined with age. He walked slowly to the central podium where Ambassador Cross had stood 8 months earlier, and he looked up at the assembled representatives without fear. Thank you for receiving me, he said. I know you have questions. I will try to answer them. Why are you here? Vos Talon asked. Your government has refused all contact. I am not here as a representative of my government, Reed replied. I am here as a scientist who spent 3 decades working alongside your people. I am here because I believe you deserve to understand what happened. Then explain, Ambassador Krellin demanded. Explain why your species chose to abandon us. Explain why you refuse to help us even as our civilizations collapse. Reed nodded slowly. I will start with a question. Do you know why humans developed fold technology? Silence. It was not because we wanted power. It was not because we wanted to conquer or control. It was because we were afraid. Reed paused, letting that sink in. When humanity discovered that we were not alone in the universe, our first reaction was terror. You have to understand, we had spent our entire existence believing we were unique, special, the only intelligent life in creation. And then we learned that the galaxy was full of species far older and more powerful than ourselves. We knew we could not compete with you technologically. We knew we could not match your military strength. We knew that if the Concordat chose to destroy us, there was nothing we could do to stop it. So we developed fold technology as a survival mechanism, a way to escape if we needed to. You developed it to run away? Krellin asked, confusion in his clicking mandibles. We developed it to survive, Reed corrected. But then something changed. We actually met you. We worked with you. We learned about your cultures, your histories, your dreams. And we discovered that you were not the monsters we had feared. You were just people, different from us in many ways, but fundamentally the same. He smiled slightly. We stopped being afraid. And when we stopped being afraid, we started wanting to help. Human nature is strange that way. We cannot see a problem without wanting to solve it. We cannot see suffering without wanting to ease it. We cannot see potential without wanting to nurture it. So we shared our medical research. We improved your trade networks. We helped your colonies grow. Not because we expected anything in return, but because helping is who we are. Reed's expression grew sad. And then we came to this chamber and asked to be accepted as equals. We asked for nothing special, just recognition that we had proven ourselves, that we had earned our place among you. You know what happened next. The chamber was very quiet. When Ambassador Cross walked out of this chamber, he was not angry. He was heartbroken. He had spent his entire career trying to build bridges between humanity and the Concordat. He believed that if we just demonstrated our worth, you would eventually accept us. And you proved him wrong. We would have accepted you eventually, Boss Talon said. These things take time. How much time? Reed asked. 73 years was not enough. A century? 2 centuries? 1,000 years? Would humanity ever have been good enough for the Concordat? No one answered. That is why we left, Reed continued. Not because we were offended. Not because we wanted revenge. Because we realized that no matter what we did, no matter how much we contributed, we would always be seen as primitives, as lesser beings, as threats to be managed rather than partners to be embraced. We could not change how you saw us, so we stopped trying. But your absence is destroying us, Counselor Merrick said. Species are dying without your help. Reed's expression became complicated, something between sympathy and sadness. Yes, he said. We know. And you do nothing? We do nothing officially, Reed said. But I am going to tell you something that I probably should not. Something that could get me in serious trouble with my government. He leaned forward slightly. Humanity has not stopped caring about the Concordat. We have not stopped wanting to help. Even now, even after everything that happened, there are humans who cannot stand to watch others suffer. But we will not come back as provisional members. We will not accept restrictions and monitoring and demands for submission. We cannot. It would mean admitting that we were never worthy of respect. That 73 years of contributions meant nothing. So what do we do? Krellin asked. There was no hostility in his voice now. Only desperation. Reed was quiet for a moment. You need to understand something fundamental about humanity, he said finally. We do not value power the way other species do. We do not measure worth by strength, or age, or technological advancement. We measure it by character, by how beings treat each other, by dignity and respect and kindness. When you demanded that we surrender our technology, you told us that our contributions did not matter. When you tried to restrict our growth, you told us that our potential did not matter. When you refused to accept us as equals, you told us that we did not matter. That is why we left. Not the demands themselves, but what those demands revealed about how you saw us. Then what would bring you back? Voss Talon asked. Reed looked up at the Supreme Arbiter. Understanding, he said. Not apologies, not concessions, not promises, just genuine understanding of what you did wrong, of why it hurt us, of what it means to treat another being as an equal. The Concordat has existed for 60,000 years. In all that time, you have operated on a hierarchy. Some species are more valuable than others. Some species deserve more respect than others. Some species matter more than others. Humanity does not believe in hierarchies. We believe that every being has inherent worth. Every species has something valuable to contribute. Every voice deserves to be heard. Reed spread his hands. We are not asking you to change your entire civilization. We are not asking you to abandon 60,000 years of tradition. We are just asking you to see us differently, to see all species differently, to recognize that worth is not determined by age or power, but by actions and character. When you can do that, when you truly understand why we left, then maybe we can talk about the future. He stepped back from the podium. I have said what I came to say. I will return to Earth now. I do not know if my words will make any difference, but I had to try. Thank you, Vostellan said quietly, for explaining what we failed to understand. Reed nodded. He turned and walked toward the exit. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. One more thing, he said. Humanity has not abandoned hope for the Concordat. We are watching. We are waiting. And we are hoping that someday you will prove us wrong about you. He walked out. The chamber remained silent for a very long time. Finally, Counselor Marek spoke. He said they have not stopped wanting to help. What did he mean by that? No one knew. But in the weeks that followed, they would begin to find out that the first miracle happened on Caltha Prime. The Belori were dying. Their genetic disorder, kept in check for decades by human treatments, had returned with devastating force. Without the medicine, their children could not survive past infancy. The species faced extinction within 2 generations. Medical Director Pell had exhausted every option. She had contacted every pharmaceutical company in the Concordat. She had pleaded with the Assembly for resources. She had even tried to reverse engineer the human treatments herself, though she lacked the expertise. Nothing worked. On the 37th day of the crisis, a ship appeared in Caltha orbit. It was small and unmarked, with no identification signals and no response to communication attempts. It simply hung in space for 6 hours, then departed. When it was gone, the Belori found a cargo container floating where the ship had been. Inside were enough treatments to sustain their population for 50 years. There was no message, no explanation, no demands. Just the medicine they needed to survive. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. When the Corthony radiation emitters failed, replacement parts appeared in their storage facilities. No one saw who delivered them. No record of their arrival existed. They were simply there, exactly what was needed, exactly when it was needed. When food riots threatened to tear apart the colony of New Velther, supply ships materialized in orbit. They departed before anyone could board them, leaving behind enough food to feed the entire population for a year. When the ephemera translation networks began to fail, updated algorithms appeared in their databases. The code was clearly human, in origin, but there was no trace of how it had been uploaded. Someone was helping. Someone with access to fold technology. Someone who cared enough to act but refused to take credit. The Concordat knew who it was. They just could not prove it. This is deliberate, Trade Minister Bellick said during an emergency session. The humans are demonstrating their capabilities. They are showing us that they can reach anywhere, at any time, without being detected. They are also saving lives, Counselor Merrickx pointed out. Whatever their motivation, they are helping species that would otherwise perish. But why? Ambassador Krellin asked. His voice had changed over the past months. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like humility. We rejected them. We humiliated them. Why would they help us after what we did? No one had an answer. The anonymous aid continued for 3 years. During that time, the worst of the crises were averted. Species that had been facing extinction stabilized. Colonies that had been starving recovered. Systems that had been failing were repaired. The Concordat survived. But it was not the same Concordat that had existed before. Something had changed in the way species looked at each other. The old hierarchies seemed less important now. The ancient rivalries felt petty in comparison to what they had almost lost. Species that had spent millennia competing began to cooperate instead, and always, in the background, there was the question of humanity. What were they doing behind their sealed borders? What were they planning? Would they ever return? Vos Tellen spent those 3 years studying humanity, not their technology or their military capabilities, but their culture, their history, their values. He learned about their wars, the terrible conflicts that had nearly destroyed them before they reached the stars. He learned about their art, the way they expressed emotions and ideas through music and painting and sculpture. He learned about their philosophy, the endless debates about meaning and purpose and morality. And he learned about their capacity for forgiveness. Humans had done terrible things to each other throughout their history. They had oppressed and enslaved and murdered their own kind. They had built empires on suffering and torn them down in rivers of blood, but they had also forgiven. Time and time again, enemies had become allies. Oppressors had acknowledged their crimes. Victims had chosen reconciliation over revenge. It was not a linear process. There were setbacks and failures, and moments when forgiveness seemed impossible. But the overall direction was clear. Humanity moved toward healing, not harm. Vos Tellen began to understand what Dr. Reed had meant. Humanity was not waiting for an apology. They were waiting for understanding. They wanted the Concordat to see why the old way of thinking was wrong. Not because humans had been hurt by it, but because it was wrong in itself. Hierarchy based on power created victims. It told some species that they mattered less than others. It justified cruelty and exploitation in the name of natural order. Humans had lived under such systems for most of their history. They knew the damage it caused, and they had decided, as a species, that they would not perpetuate it. That was why they had helped the Concordat even after being rejected. Because helping was right, regardless of whether it was rewarded. Because every life had value, regardless of which species it belonged to. Because the measure of a civilization was how it treated those who could do nothing for it. In the 4th year after humanity's withdrawal, Vos Tellen called a special session of the Assembly, not to discuss policy or respond to crisis, but to propose something that had never been proposed in the Concordat's 60,000 year history. A fundamental change in how species related to each other. We have operated on hierarchies since our founding, Vos Tellen said. We have ranked species by age, by power, by technological advancement. We have created tiers of membership, with corresponding tiers of rights and responsibilities. This system has maintained stability. It has prevented major conflicts. It has allowed our civilization to function for longer than most species have existed. But it has also caused harm. It has told species that their worth depends on factors beyond their control. It has created resentment and division. It has made us blind to the contributions of those we considered inferior. The supreme arbiter's geometric form shifted into patterns of determination. I propose that we abolish the hierarchy, that we recognize all member species as equals, regardless of age or power, that we create a new framework based on cooperation rather than competition. The chamber exploded in argument. Such a change would overturn everything the Concordat was built on. It would require rewriting thousands of treaties and agreements. It would challenge the status of species that had spent millennia at the top of the hierarchy. But something else happened too. Species that had never spoken in assembly sessions rose to support the proposal. Species that had been silent for centuries found their voices. Species that had been ranked as inferior demanded to be heard. The vote took 3 days. It was not unanimous. It was not even close to unanimous. But it passed. The Galactic Concordat, the oldest political structure in the known universe, officially declared that all species were equal. And somewhere beyond the sealed borders of human space, humanity was watching. 5 years after Ambassador David Cross walked out of the assembly chamber, a message arrived from Earth that it was addressed to the entire Concordat, broadcast on every frequency and in every language. The sender was identified as the Human Collective Government. "We have been watching," the message said. "We have seen your struggles, your debates, your attempts to change. We have seen species that spent millennia competing learn to cooperate. We have seen ancient prejudices begin to fade. We have seen the Concordat transform itself in ways we never expected. We would like to talk." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every species, every faction, every representative demanded to be part of the conversation. Vos Tellen had to institute special rules just to manage the chaos. In the end, it was decided that the same 3 individuals who had witnessed humanity's departure would represent the Concordat in the initial talks. Vos Tellen, of course. Ambassador Krellin, whose transformation over the past 5 years had been remarkable. And Counselor Merrick's, whose ancient wisdom had guided so many through the crisis. They met on neutral ground, a small station at the edge of what had been human space. The human delegation consisted of Ambassador Cross, now older and grayer, but with the same calm confidence he had shown 5 years ago. Dr. Thomas Reed, who had risked so much to explain humanity's position. And a young woman named Elena Vasquez, introduced as the new Director of External Relations. The talks lasted for 2 weeks. They did not go smoothly. 5 years of separation had created new misunderstandings. The Concordat had changed, but so had humanity. Both sides had to relearn how to communicate with each other. But there was something different about these talks. A willingness to listen that had not existed before. A recognition that both sides had made mistakes and both sides could do better. On the 15th day, they reached an agreement. Humanity would not rejoin the Concordat. That organization, despite its reforms, still carried too much history. Too many species remembered the old hierarchies too well. True equality would take generations to achieve. Instead, they would create something new. A partnership between the Concordat and humanity based on mutual respect and shared goals. Not a merger, but an alliance. Not absorption, but cooperation. The Partnership Accord, as it came to be called, established 3 fundamental principles. First, no species would be ranked above any other. Contributions would be valued, but not used to create hierarchy. Every voice would have equal weight in discussions. Second, help would be offered freely, without expectation of return. Species in crisis would receive assistance because it was right, not because it was profitable. Third, borders would remain. Both humanity and the Concordat would maintain their sovereignty. But those borders would be open, allowing free movement of people, ideas, and goods. It was not a perfect agreement. Many details remained to be worked out. Many species had reservations. Many humans questioned whether the Concordat could truly be trusted. But it was a beginning. The signing ceremony took place in the assembly chamber where everything had started. The same floating platforms, the same artificial sky, the same crystalline architecture. But the atmosphere was completely different. Ambassador Cross stood at the central podium once more. This time, the eyes watching him were not hostile or dismissive. They were hopeful. 5 years ago, I stood in this chamber and told you that humanity was leaving, Cross said. I told you that we would seal our borders and pursue our own path. I told you that we would not return." He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. "I was wrong. Not about leaving. That was necessary. You needed to understand what our absence meant. You needed to see the consequences of treating others as inferior. You needed to feel the loss before you could appreciate what you had. But I was wrong about not returning. I underestimated you. I thought that 60,000 years of hierarchy could not be undone. I thought that species who had always ranked themselves above others could never learn to see differently. You proved me wrong, and I have never been happier to be mistaken." Cross turned to face Vos Tellen directly. "Supreme Arbiter, 5 years ago you asked me what humanity wanted. I gave you an answer then, respect. But I should have given you a different answer. What we really wanted was partnership. True partnership between equals who value each other for who they are, not what they can provide. Today, we begin that partnership, not as the Concordat absorbing humanity, or humanity dominating the Concordat, but as two civilizations choosing to walk together toward a future neither could reach alone." Vos Tellen moved forward, their geometric form shifting into patterns that even humans could recognize as joy. "On behalf of the Galactic Concordat, I accept this partnership, and I offer something that no Supreme Arbiter has ever offered in our 60,000-year history." The ancient being paused. "An apology. We were wrong to reject you. We were wrong to demand your submission. We were wrong to see you as threats rather than partners. We were wrong, and we are sorry." The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, something remarkable happened. Representatives began to rise from their platforms. One by one, species after species stood in recognition, not of the ceremony, but of the moment, of what it meant for the future of galactic civilization. By the time the last representative was standing, David Cross had tears in his eyes. "Apology accepted," he said quietly. The partnership accord was signed that day. But more important than any document was the understanding that had made it possible. The galaxy had learned that power did not determine worth, that strength did not justify cruelty, that the measure of a civilization was not its technology or its age, but its compassion. Humanity had taught them that lesson, not through war, not through threats, but through absence, by showing them what they would lose if they could not change. And the galaxy had changed. In the years that followed, the partnership flourished. Human fold technology was shared freely, allowing species to travel between stars in ways they had never imagined. Concordat science advanced human understanding of physics and biology by centuries. Together, they solved problems that neither could have solved alone. There were still conflicts, still misunderstandings, still moments when the old prejudices threatened to resurface. Building a civilization based on equality was not easy. But every time they stumbled, they remembered what they had almost lost, and they found the strength to try again. On the 10th anniversary of the Partnership Accord, a memorial was built in the Assembly Chamber. It commemorated not the agreement, but the lesson that had made it possible. The inscription read simply, "We learned too late what we were losing. May we never forget." Ambassador Cross, now retired, attended the dedication ceremony. He looked up at the memorial for a long time. "It was worth it," he said finally. "All of it. The pain, the separation, the uncertainty. It was worth it to reach this moment." Director Vasquez stood beside him. "Do you think they really understand now?" Cross considered the question. "I think they're trying to understand. And in the end, that's all anyone can ask." He smiled, looking out at the chamber filled with beings from nearly 1,000 species, different forms, different histories, different perspectives, but all of them, for the first time in 60,000 years, truly equal. "We came to the stars looking for a place in the universe," Cross said. "We found something better. We found a family. A strange, complicated, often difficult family, but a family nonetheless. He turned to walk out of the chamber. "Let's go home," he said. "We've got work to do." And as he left, the galaxy continued to turn. Stars were born and died. Species rose and fell. Empires grew and crumbled, but the partnership endured. Two civilizations walking together toward a future bright with possibility. Because in the end, that was what humanity had always wanted. Not power, not dominion, not even safety. Just a place among the stars where they could belong. And now, at last, they had found it.